James I, King of Scotland, succeeded Elizabeth to the throne as James I, becoming the first Stuart King of England. He had been brought up as a Protestant. He was a learned man who wrote treatises in English and Latin, but believed in witchcraft. His accession was welcome because it reduced the danger of civil war. However, he ignored Parliament and based his rule on the theory of the divine right of kings. He believed that, as a monarch, he was the representative of God on earth. He joined Scotland to England and Wales as one kingdom with two separate parliaments, which is called Great Britain, and he introduced a distinctive flag called the Union Jack. The king settled in London, where he took under royal patronage Shakespeare's company, which became the King's Men, and poets like John Donne and George Herbert. A year after his coronation, James held a conference at Somerset House to sign a peace treaty with Spain. This treaty put an end to Spanish claims to the English throne on the one hand, and to English attacks on Spanish ships coming back from America on the other. In 1604, at Hampton Court, the king met the representatives of the bishops and the Puritans, who were extreme Protestants, to try to solve the conflict between them. They agreed about baptism, ordination, and the civil role of the Church. James also ordered a new translation of the Bible, published in 1611, which is considered one of the masterpieces of English literature. The Catholics had been excluded from Hampton Court, so a group of them, led by Guy Fawkes, organized the Gunpowder Plot to blow up the Parliament on 5th November 1605. The opening of Parliament on this date would have gathered the King, the Privy Council, peers, members of Parliament and royal officials, but the conspiracy was found out and the plotters were executed. The government did not start a period of persecution against the Catholics, but encouraged public celebration at the failure of the plot. This became an annual event as Bonfire Night every 5th November, with fireworks and Guy's figures representing Guy Fawkes, which are burnt on bonfires. The Church of England identified uniformity with the security of the state, and therefore dissent was treated as treason. A direct consequence was the emigration of many dissenters to the New World. In 1620, the Pilgrim Fathers, religious dissenters who had first taken shelter in Holland, left England for America on the Mayflower and founded Plymouth in Massachusetts. James' son, Charles I, was very fond of art and patronized painters like Rubens and Van Dyck, creating one of Europe's greatest art collections. He married Henrietta Maria, the Catholic daughter of the King of France. Like his father, he avoided Parliament and ruled 11 years without it. The Commons were strongly Protestant and denied the king money for more than a year's time. This confrontation led to the Petition of Right of 1628, which stated that the king could not imprison without trial or impose taxes without the consent of the Commons. The petition became the foundation of all later declarations of civil rights, but Charles dismissed it because he thought that he was king by divine right, such as his father James I. In 1635, he used the royal prerogative to extend ship money, a tax on coastal towns, for their defense. As he needed money to pay his army to fight a rebellion in Scotland, the king was forced to summon the so-called Short Parliament in 1640, which refused to give him the money. A new parliament was elected in the same year, the so-called Long Parliament. It became one of the great institutions of English history because it reflected the change in wealth that had taken place in the Tudor period with a shift from the medieval church and the landed aristocracy to a rising middle class of small landowners, city merchants and the professions. It was this new middle class who wanted the king to be subject to Parliament. Parliament worked to assert control over the king, passing laws to reduce his powers. In 1642, Charles entered the House of Commons to arrest its 5 most extreme members of Parliament, but they had already escaped. The king raised an army of royalists and declared war. The parliamentarians, the king's opponents, prepared to fight back, and the civil war had begun. Between 1642 and 1649, there were bloody battles between the royalists and the parliamentarians. It was a struggle between tyranny embodied by Stuarts' absolutism and liberty represented by Parliament. It was also a class conflict between the aristocrat landowners that supported the king and a middle class of merchants, artisans and small gentry who sided with the Puritans and Parliament. Royalists and parliamentarians, also called Roundheads because they consider long hair sinful and cut theirs short, were clearly different in appearance, ideologies and ways of life. The two parties were also regionally different. The Royalists were concentrated in Wales, Cornwall and west of England, while the City of London, the seaports and Eastern England supported Parliament. The parliamentarian army, called New Model Army, was stronger because it was made up of professional soldiers, the Ironsides, and it had cavalry. These were better armed and equipped. They were mainly middle-class men who thought that God was on their side. They were trained through discipline and collective prayer. The commander of the parliamentarian army was a member of Parliament called Oliver Cromwell. A strongly built and religious man, he regarded it as his mission to free his land from superstition. Charles I was captured in 1648 and was brought to London, where a commission was set up to try him for treason. The Long Parliament was purged of 370 Presbyterian and Royalist sympathizers. The remaining 121 most radical members were called the Rump Parliament. The king was condemned to death and his execution took place in 1649. The Rump Parliament, so the group of supporters of Cromwell, abolished the monarchy and declared a republic called the Commonwealth. The House of Lords was abolished and censorship was introduced. Cromwell took the New Model Army to Ireland for a campaign of repression which culminated in the slaughter of the citizens of Drogheda. Cromwell also defeated the Scottish royalists who had crowned Charles I's son, Charles II, King of Scotland. Charles II managed to escape to France, and Cromwell gave himself the title of Lord Protector of England, Scotland and Ireland. In 1655, Cromwell divided the country into 11 military regions under major generals. Puritan rules were introduced, including execution for adultery, the games, dancing and theatre performances were banned. Inns, pubs and theatres were closed down. Cromwell banned also Christmas and Easter and replaced them with days of fasting. The Republic encouraged foreign trade and both the merchant and the war fleet grew rapidly. In 1651, Parliament had passed the Navigation Acts, giving a sort of monopoly of trade to British ships. Cromwell died in 1658 at the age of 59. His son Richard held office for 8 months before the Rump vote to end the Protectorate. In 1660, the army invited Charles II to come back from France, and so the monarchy was restored.